Welcome everybody to our Tanya share. It's been a while. It's definitely it's been a few weeks even before Pesach, so it's been a very long time since we have seen each other. It's so nice to see everybody again. I'm going to do a brief recap so that we could catch up to what we're supposed to be up to, and then we'll continue into the chapters we're supposed to be discussing today. Just a brief note: sponsorship is always available. You could always contact Rabbi and Mrs. Wolf for that. And there also is a Lag BaOmer, beautiful performance, learning, everything. You should check it out on the website. It's going to be very, very special, as all the events here are. So check that out. Okay, so today we're going to start talking about faith and what faith looks in our active everyday life. And we've been talking about this for the last few classes because in chapters 20, 21, 22, the Alter Rebbe talks about, in theory, what does faith actually mean? What does Achdus Hashem, the unity of God, mean? And we went into discussing that the unity of God is not just understanding that there's a creator in the world, and the fact that he created this world and set the ball rolling, but he's actively accurately involved in every single detail, every single aspect of it. So in the beginning, we spoke about Achdus Hashem and understanding that unity of God is really actively studying how Hashem creates the world. What does it mean that he creates the world constantly? Making that a very active awareness for ourselves all the time. And not just that, then we discussed what the opposite is. What is the opposite of Achdus Hashem? What does it mean when we are not actively understanding what Achdus Hashem, Chas v'shalom, doing the opposite, saying that Hashem's attention to the world's detail doesn't actually exist? What is that called? So there's a word called shnius, which means like duality, where we don't necessarily actively believe or recognize Hashem's involvement in the world. And this could happen on a daily basis, unfortunately, because we often get lost in our worlds and don't necessarily remember that Hashem is actively involved, right? So anything along the lines of, and the Alter Rebbe gives some pretty intense examples. So if this person gets angry, why is that a negation of Achdus Hashem? Why is that Chas v'shalom considered idol worship, according to the Torah? And the idea that we explained last class is, if a person is experiencing anger, then the reason why they're experiencing that anger is usually because something didn't happen according to what they wanted, right? Either somebody else hurt them, insulted them, did something that they didn't want to happen, cut you off in your lane, gave you the wrong directions to wherever it is that you were going to go, told you that your child was going to make it into camp and didn't. Your husband said he was going to do something, and after you reminded him 30 times, he still didn't, and you're getting upset. That means that it could be a few things, but what it means is that your will wasn't happening. Or something happened out of the ordinary and is affecting you. You're getting punished or hurt, and it wasn't supposed to happen that way. And so for whatever it is, or whatever reason it is that you are angry or upset, you are frustrated in ways, that is an affirmation, a negative affirmation, of the fact that Hashem is not so involved in your world, or Hashem's involvement is a bad involvement. He doesn't want your best. Or that really you're the master of your own world, and then for some reason someone else got involved and took over for a minute, and that's frustrating for you. All of those things are a negation of Achdus Hashem, of the deep understanding that Hashem is not just the creator who created, but is actively, always, constantly involved in every aspect of your life. Anger shouldn't be something that you should be experiencing. Frustration shouldn't be something that you're experiencing if you always understand and believe that Hashem is involved. Now, we get frustrated and upset all the time, and that's human, and that's okay. The idea, I'm not trying to write people off if they get upset or frustrated. I'm very human as well. But the idea is that we want to understand what is wrong with the frustration, meaning that human part of yourself is expressing itself. yes, we all have a nefesh habahamis, we all have that animal soul, and sometimes he gets the better of us just because we are human. But to understand that that's our animal part of ourselves instead of the godly part of ourselves speaking is an important thing to recognize. It's not just, oh, you're getting angry, oh, you're getting frustrated, you're losing control, right? Like that would be the technical thing that's wrong with being angry. You're not in control of yourself, or you're not acting like an adult, or you're just being too uptight, right? These basically like character traits that are not so attractive. That's not the point. What we're bringing here is a much deeper piece, which is that's your voice of your animal soul. It's not just you're acting the way that's not dignified. No, you're acting from a space of an animal soul who is negating his very essence, doesn't recognize that there is a creator in the world. He closes his eyes from seeing that there's a creator in the world. You don't want to be listening to that voice. You want to be listening to the voice, the godly soul within you, who's in a constant state of recognition of God in his life, in her life, however you look at your animal soul. Your godly soul. So if I'm able to recognize this is much deeper than just character traits or quality of life or how I'm expressing myself or what people think of me, that's not why the Torah equates anger to avodah zarah, to idol worship. The reason why it's equated is because it's a voice of the animal soul saying there is no God. There's somebody else who had power over your life. Something happened to you that shouldn't have, and you were the victim of fate. That concept is an idol worship concept. People think that idol worship is just about praying to, figurines, having a figurine, in a store, and you can't look at it and don't even bow your body even a little bit. That's not at all what idol worship is about nowadays. Nowadays, it's a negation of Achdus Hashem, where we lose sight of God in our lives, where we lose sight of his perfect involvement in every single detail. And the more that we could recognize that, the more that we're bringing Achdus Hashem into our reality. So all of this we spoke about in theory. And that was very beautiful, right? And we can make that theory applicable, and that's what we did last class. But now we're going to be going into chapters 23 and a little bit of chapter 25, just to kind of bring the chapter 23 all together and see how the Alter Rebbe is leading into something that is supposed to be a part of this whole journey, right? The whole journey is the journey of the Beinoni, the average person, how to make us, this average, really human person who has a godly soul and an animal soul and is constantly feeling the struggle within. How can we make that person who's experiencing struggle, make it easy for him to perform Torah and mitzvahs? So this whole book, right, so far up until, chapters 1 through 22 have been all about trying to make it easier for us, our very fleshly human people, bodies, selves, to get to that space of performing Torah and mitzvahs all the time and thinking about God all the time. And in the beginning, we were saying it's almost impossible. How is that even possible? Moshe Rabbeinu in Deuteronomy and Devarim says it's easy. It's close to you. It's so available to you to do this. And our question at the beginning was, how is it possible that he's saying that this is easy? This is so hard. We're struggling with this. And so the Alter Rebbe wrote the entire Tanya, right, this whole Sefer Shel Beinanim, in order to make it easier for us, to outline for us how we can achieve what Moshe Rabbeinu said we can achieve. So right now we're up to the space of saying, Achdus Hashem, beautiful idea, idol worship. We don't want to go near that. How do we make this practical? So the Alter Rebbe continues on to Perek Chav Gimel, chapter 23, and he says that when we practice Torah and mitzvahs, we are actually affirming the unity of God. When we are engaging in learning Torah and performing the mitzvahs, what we're doing is we're saying there is a God in the world. We understand that. We believe in that. And with this action, we are solidifying our lives and our belief in an action, in something physical in this world. And we're letting the world know, letting ourselves know, we are affirming, it's like a declaration of our faith that we believe in him and his involvement in our lives. Okay? And the sin, obviously being the opposite, right? If a person mistakenly does an Aveira, then what's happening is he lost sight of that. He is affirming that I have lost sight of Achdas Hashem. I have lost sight of Hashem's perfect involvement in my world. I forgot that he is the one creator and that he and his will is so much more important than my own. I've lost sight of my whole purpose in this world. And I thought that he doesn't really see what I'm doing. He's not involved in my life. And I could do this and kind of get away with it. That's what a sin is. It's an affirmation of the lack of Achdas Hashem in our world, where we think that we are our own boss and that we kind of control our own lives. And if we do something, it's not really making a very huge impact. It's okay. It just is. Instead of seeing the world, seeing our entire lives as, let's just go back for a moment. I don't know if you remember the first classes, but the way that we built up this idea of Achdas Hashem is understanding that when I look at my world, I don't see Hashem, right? There's this physical world. I see a table. I see a room. I don't see God in this world. And so there, the Alter Rebbe was saying, that's because there's all these shells. There's all these covers for godliness. There's this physical world that's really covering God. But if I were to be able to put on godliness glasses and literally see how Hashem is keeping this world into existence at every given moment, I would see Hashem's perspective on the world instead of seeing my own perspective on the world. 2 or 3 classes ago, we were saying we had this whole class on Hashem's perspective and man's perspective. Hashem's perspective is the world doesn't even exist to him. It's nothing outside of, it's not even outside of him. It's within him. There's nothing even there because Hashem is everything. In our opinion, we are very much in existence. We are very much here. We feel like we have very important lives and we have our whole world. But to Hashem, that is absolute nothing. It's like nothing of nothingness to him. So from the godly perspective, from Hashem's perspective, everything here that he keeps into existence at every given moment is nothing. In our perspective, we see it and we think it's really something. If we were to be able to channel Hashem's perspective into our daily life, we would see how he sustains us at every given moment, and we would cease to exist if he didn't choose to keep us here at every given moment. Right? That's the detail of seeing his involvement in our world. He didn't just create a world that functions on its own and nature just kind of keeps things rolling. It's him keeping us into existence at every given moment. Right? So if I'm performing an Avera, what's happening is I'm saying, he's not keeping the world into existence at every given moment. It's me totally missing that there's a creator who is involved in even the sin that I'm performing, right? So if, let's say, someone is speaking Lashon Hara on the phone to her sister, right? So at the moment that she's speaking that Lashon Hara, she's like, I know I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I think it's important to share, right? However way we justify whatever it is that we're doing all the time. So she's using the phone. She's using her mouth. She's using everything, right? All of those details that Hashem is making happen at every given moment, but she's negating that he's doing that as she's performing that Avera. No, I could talk even if Hashem doesn't, right? Hashem's not involved in my talking. I'm talking right now. In that moment, she's losing sight of his direct impact on every detail of her life. Yes? So when we do an Avera, it's an affirmation of idol worship. It's an affirmation of something else has power. Either it's me or the phone still will work. My lips will still talk. The words will still come out of my mouth. I will still be able to breathe. Every single aspect of what's happening in that moment, it has its own power. It's not completely dependent on God. That distance, that disconnect from God is considered idol worship. It's considered, I'm giving something else power, and I'm not giving Hashem the ultimate power of the very first Dibra. I am the Lord your Hashem who took you out of Mitzrayim. He is the only sole God. And then the next Dibra, that there are no others. There is no other power. The problem is when we start thinking that other things have power. So when we perform a mitzvah, what we are actually doing is we are practicing unity of God. We are performing and declaring unity of God in this physical world. Something that I do with my clients sometimes is, if a woman has to process something, oftentimes when I'm speaking to someone, it's all very much in the realm of her thinking, because our thinking creates our actions ultimately. But what's so important is, let's say, for example, a woman is feeling a tremendous amount of fear, tremendous amount of anxiety around something. And we talk through it and we walk through the fear. And I give her certain tools to be able to walk through that fear and get to the other side of it, to trust God, to trust her husband, to trust whoever it is in her life that she needs, to trust herself. I always say at the end, and this is something, it's not me, I learned this from my coach, and it's actually from the Tanya and from Hashem, where you don't just talk about it, you don't just think about it, you plant it in a physical act. So when I finish the conversation, I say, okay, great. Now you go and do something with that intention, with that belief. So if you have walked away from this conversation with saying, like, your takeaway is, I can trust Hashem is going to carry me through this situation that I'm going through. I can trust that Hashem is going to make sure that this child is going to be supported and loved and respected by his peers. Now I'm going to take that energy of trust and I'm going to translate it into my body. Let my body experience that trust with whatever it is that I'm doing. And it could be a mitzvah, right? It could be, I'm feeling this trust. I'm going to put tzedakah in. I'm going to continue putting in tzedakah for a week. Or it could just be, now I'm going to go on a walk and I'm just going to continue physically feeling that state of trust that I already put into my mind and I put into my speech, but now I want to actually translate it into my body. Where do we learn this from? We learn it right from here. That Torah and mitzvahs are the physical declaration of the unity of God. Now, the way the Zohar describes mitzvahs, Torah and mitzvahs, are that they are the limbs of God. It says, "Araitza v'kuchabrichu kulachad," that Torah and Hashem are one. And it's a very interesting concept. Like, if you start thinking about what does it mean that Torah and mitzvahs are one with Hashem, or they are the limbs of Hashem? What are the limbs of Hashem? How does that actually translate? We were just saying how Hashem is beyond. Hashem is everything is nothing to God. What does that actually mean? So if we think about the body to the soul, the body is something that actually covers the soul. But what's also actually tremendous about the body is the body also expresses the soul. The body is inextricably intertwined with the soul. As soon as the soul decides it wants something, whether it's the godly soul or the animal soul, the body immediately responds, right? Let's say the godly soul says, I feel like I want to daven. The body starts davening, like right away, just immediately. Let's get a sitter. And if the animal soul says, I really want to eat right now, that's where you start heading to the kitchen, opening up the fridge, because the body immediately responds to what the soul wants. They're deeply connected. Now, what's really interesting, if you start looking at the cooperation between the body and soul, and how there's like this direct communication between the body and soul, you could start bringing that kind of analogy to the mitzvahs to Hashem, where the mitzvahs take on and express Hashem's will. Hashem decided, obviously, that mitzvahs are going to express his will, but that's what Hashem wants. Hashem wants that the mitzvahs express his deep desire, and his deep desire is to be felt in this world by physical people who can negate his existence with their brains, and Hashem's desire is that we perform mitzvahs that do the very opposite. This is his will. Now, what's interesting is to start talking about will just for a moment, desire for a moment. It's an interesting thing to think about, because oftentimes people think about their will, or they think about a desire. And oftentimes a desire that a person has is really just to meet a different desire, a deeper, more inner desire. So for example, I want to have a good job. Okay, is that your deep desire? Is that your is that your end result desire? And usually the answer is, no, I want to have a good job because I want to make money. Oh, so is that your deep desire? You want to make money? No, I really want to make money because I want to, and then everything else, right? I want to have a house. I want prestige. I feel like it will open up doors for me. I want kavod, I want honor, and it just leads to more and more and more things. But really, you started out with, I want a good job, but that's not your ultimate desire. Your ultimate desire is something further along, right? So if you look at other desires, like I really want to eat healthy. We really would love to eat healthy. Is it just that you want to eat healthy, or is there something more? And it oftentimes goes deeper and deeper and deeper till you get to a really core desire. Alter Rebbe here talks about core desire. And he says the core desire of a yid is to connect to life. Really, every person wants to be connected to life, unless someone is nebach, really sickly, hurting. Most people will do anything to connect to life, will connect to their source, which means that the body deeply wants to connect to its soul, because that soul is their source of life. And deeply, ultimately, what does that mean? To connect to God, to connect to Hashem, to connect to what He wants, to connect to the life source.
To have that accident to connect to Hashem?
What do you mean accident?
Like you said, if someone is, this is what you said, no? If someone is sick or have an accident.
No. Chas v'shalom. No. I'm saying without any problems, most people want to just deeply connect to life, no matter what, right? We are always, the whole trauma world now, right? The whole idea behind trauma and stuck trauma, and that's why there's so much work now around it with somatic therapy, is the idea that when a person goes into a traumatic state, what are they doing? They're doing anything to survive. And that's what their whole entire existence is right now. So people who are stuck in a state of trauma, it's because they're literally still in survival mode, because there's something so intrinsic to existence that you want to stay alive as much as possible. That's literally what stuck trauma is about. It's about being in that state of trying to make sure that you stay alive. So what are we trying to say? If we have an understanding of what our will is, and really actually see that that will is deeply connected to our source, which is neshama and Hashem, then we would be in a constant state of doing Torah and mitzvahs. Right? If we deeply acknowledge that our source of life is not, I just have to make sure that I'm breathing and keeping my body alive. That's not the true source of life. The true source of life is actually the highest, that's bringing our body alive. Then we would see that Torah and mitzvahs are what keeps us actually alive. It's actually an interesting thing. I never heard this, but I just heard this in the shir in preparing for this, that the body is actually holy itself. How do we see this in halacha? That when Hashem Yishmar, when a stillborn is born and then immediately passes away, they still name that baby, because that body is still going to be experiencing Tchias Mesim. They'll still give the baby a bris, because that baby's body is still holy and pure and gets a proper burial just like any person.
Are you sure they do a bris for that baby?
That's what I heard. I was shocked too. Can you imagine? So the baby gets a Jewish name, a girl gets named, and the boy gets named Hashem Yishmar. No one should know of such things, but to testify how holy the baby's body is, right? The baby has not technically lived in this world, and yet that body is still so tahar and pure and handles with so much sanctity. Why? Because the Alter Rebbe explains that our body is like a markava. A markava in Hebrew is a chariot. What is a chariot? A car, a vehicle. What does that mean? The vehicle gets you to a place further than you could get with your own 2 feet, right? You could hop in a car and literally drive somewhere 6 hours that you wouldn't have been able to reach in that one day with just your 2 feet. It's incredible how it gets you there. And what's ironic about that is that the car itself has no will. Its will is your will. Where you want to go, that's where it will take you, and much further than where you thought you could go yourself. And that's what the body is to the soul. It is a markava. It serves the soul. It does the will of the soul. And it takes the soul and expresses the soul's desire much more than what the soul could do itself. The soul would not be able to perform the way that the body does for the soul. And yet the Merkava, the body, doesn't have any will unto itself. It serves, it's completely subservient to the soul itself. And that's the way that we connect in ways to Hashem. The Torah and mitzvahs are considered markava. When we take on Torah and mitzvahs, these limbs of God, we are becoming a vehicle for God and His will in this world. In a sense, Hashem is saying, you're taking me where I can't go. Now, of course, Hashem can do whatever He wants, but He's choosing to tell us, I want you to take me here where I can't go myself, where I cannot get myself. I want you, your physical bodies, to embody my will and take me where I can't go. Take me on. Bring me there. And fulfill my will, fulfill my desire, which is so, so incredibly powerful. So when we're in tune with that, we're in tune with our body, performing Torah and mitzvahs, being a merkava for God, being a chariot for God, we are taking on something beyond just like what we think of as, oh, this is a good deed. It takes on an entirely different meaning. And I'll share with you, I don't know if this is a good thing to share with the entire world, but I'll just share it. I went to a mikvah, a woman's mikvah, that was Hasidish, that I think learns these concepts. And I went to a different mikvah once that I don't think really takes on the understanding of what Torah mitzvahs are. The experience of the one that doesn't learn Hasidus was, okay, you're good, you finished, you dipped, you did the mitzvah, beautiful, thank you for coming. And I left and I was grateful and it was a great experience. When I went to the Chassidish mikvah and the woman who was there every single time I dipped, she said, Tahar, right? She was taking on the really deep belief that when I am performing this mitzvah and when she is witnessing this mitzvah, she and I are becoming merkava for the Eibishter's will. And I felt it. I felt it the way she said it. I felt it in the whole experience. It's not just, okay, we're dipping and we're doing a mitzvah. It's, I am becoming a chariot for His will. And in that moment, I am choosing His will over my will. And I am taking Hashem to a place where He chooses me to go where He can't go Himself. Me, a nothing, a speck of nothingness in His regard, technically in His observation, but He chooses for me to fulfill His will. And I felt it. I told her, she's very special. The mikveh ladies in, just a little shout out to the mikveh women in LA Mikvah's Esther, I think it is, on Pico. But it was so special to really see someone who deeply understands what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is me becoming a merkava, a chariot for God. Now, there are some people who were literally called merkava. And certain people take on Hashem's will a little bit better than others. And those people are tzaddikim, who every single aspect of their life, even neutral things, not mitzvahs, are still doing the same thing that we would be doing when it comes to mitzvahs. When we do a mitzvah, we're fulfilling the will of God. When a tzaddik does a mitzvah, he is a merkava always. So even when he's sleeping, even when he's eating, he's walking in the street, he is still that merkava fulfilling the will in a way that is not necessarily relatable to the rest of us. And there's just a beautiful story of, there's a few stories, but there's a story of the Maggid of Mezrich. He was trying to go to sleep. Friday afternoon, according to the Kabbalah, is like a time for sleep. He used to say that the Alter Rebbe would fall asleep in his tefillin. Like it's I don't know what it is exactly, Kabbalistically speaking, but it's supposed to be this slumbering experience. And so the Maggid was trying to go to sleep, but he kept on getting woken up because Rav Aaron Karliner, who was either in the next room or somewhere close by, was singing Shir Shirim. Now, the Maggid of Mezrich couldn't actually hear him physically, but he heard the clamor on high of Rav Aaron Karliner's Shir Shirim that he kept on getting jolted awake. So he told his attendees to tell Rav Aaron to stop saying Shir Hashirim so he could sleep. Now, what's beautiful about the story are two things. First of all, that Rav Aaron Kaliner's Shir Hashirim was making such a huge, a clamor on high that it was shaking the heavens enough to wake up the Maggid Mizrich. But the second thing that was incredible is to note that the Maggid of Mizrich's sleep was more Merkava than the Shir Hashirim of Rav Aaron Karliner, meaning it was more important. He understood that his sleep, it's not that he needed a nap. The idea is that his sleep was so much fulfilling the will of the Eibishter because of who he was, that in ways it had to take precedence over the Shir Hashirim. There's another story of, and this is just not quite relatable, obviously, but Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, the lawyer for Klal Yisrael, it says about him that when he would sleep, he would have someone standing at his head quoting Zohar, and someone at his feet saying Mishnayos, and he would be sleeping. And if they made a mistake, he would wake up and correct them. Or he would correct them in his sleep. That's what it was. And then he would wake up and he would continue like that. That was his sleep. He's literally hearing his two Talmidim saying Torah, and he's sleeping the whole time. And then in the middle, he's interrupting, making sure that they're saying it correctly. But his sleep was not a regular sleep. It's a Markava sleeping. It's someone who lives the will of the Eibishter at every given moment sleeping. It's an entirely different level of actually sleeping. But what's important for us to remember, and I think this kind of clinches together, and we'll talk about it a little bit more next time, what is a mitzvah? What's actually happening when we perform a mitzvah are three different things. The first one is when I decide to affirm Achdus Hashem, and I'm practicing a mitzvah, what's happening momentarily is I'm choosing Hashem's will over my will. It's just in that moment. It just stays right there. I'm not a tzaddik, so it's not like I'm living this constantly, but when I choose in that moment to fulfill Hashem's will over my own, I'm affirming Achdus Hashem over the opposite. I'm doing something powerful. I'm taking on His will. I'm becoming a Merkava in that moment. The second thing that happens is, and what's beautiful about mitzvahs is that a mitzvah gereris mitzvah, one mitzvah leads to the next mitzvah. And what often happens is you'll see a certain refinement. That's actually quoted from some of the Rishonim, that the reason for mitzvahs is in order to refine us as people, to refine our thoughts, to refine our actions. It makes you a different person as you practice and perform mitzvahs. The Rebbe always used to encourage people, if you're going to give a large sum of money, give it a little bit at a time, because you're practicing to give the tzedakah. Each time you practice it, it refines you. It makes you a different person. Each time you do it, it's a mitzvah too. But the idea is that you're becoming a generous person, slowly but surely, right? If Atomic Habits had been written thousands of years before, we would have credited it to Atomic Habits, but now we could actually credit it to Torah mitzvahs, where every single time you perform it, you are actually refining yourself as a person. The third thing that happens when we do a mitzvah is it actually creates godly energy. When we do a mitzvah and we step into the limbs of the Eibishter and we become a Merkava for His will, we're creating something. And when we create something spiritual and godly, that lives forever. It's infinite. And when you do that mitzvah, it's because it's godly and God is infinite, it stands, it lasts. A sin is not the same way. When we do an avera, it's an ungodly energy. And if it's not godly, it dies. It doesn't last. It's not infinite. When you do a mitzvah, it's a forever thing. And so it takes a whole new definition when you say, I'm doing this mitzvah, I'm creating a godly energy that will last for always. It gives so much more purpose to that mitzvah. Now, what's interesting is if you think about this for a moment, that there's three different things that are powerful about a mitzvah. The fact that momentarily you're taking on His will instead of your own. And secondly, it refines you. And thirdly, the idea that it's forever. You could look at that and say, well, I feel like I am performing Torah mitzvahs in a different way now, because now I see that there's so much benefit to me. Like, I want to become a better person. I want to create a lot of godly energy. That feels great. I want to, do certain mitzvahs over other mitzvahs. Like, let me do derech eretz. That's like an easy one because I could do it all the time. Or let me do tzedakah because that one's so accessible to me. And that way I could do it more often than, let's say, other mitzvahs. And so we're going to skip forward for a second. In chapter 25, the Alter Rebbe talks about how, yes, it's true. Those two reasons, reason number 2, that it refines you, and reason number 3, that it's forever, those are very powerful to think about, and they should motivate you. But more important than anything is reason number 1, where in that moment you decided Hashem's will is greater than my own, that complete Kabbalah's all, even though it's momentary. It's not going to last forever like reason number 3. But that Hashem is the reason for creation. His will for creation is that you do that mitzvah. And in that moment, what you did is you said, I am taking on his will for the entire cosmos, the entire reason why he keeps this whole world in existence. I'm acknowledging that, and I'm taking that on in doing this mitzvah just because he said. Even if I'm not in the mood and I don't feel so holy when I'm doing it because maybe I even feel a little resentful, whatever it is, that doesn't matter. If I did the mitzvah and I took on his will instead of my own, I'm literally achieving the will for the entire world in my one act. And yes, it's beautiful that will refine me. And it's so powerful that we're creating an energy that lasts forever. But more important than anything is that one momentary mitzvah. And that's why the Alter Rebbe says that, halachically, if a person actually leaves prison, there's a story, but I'm forgetting who it was about. Someone asked, theoretically, I have to follow up with you who this was about. I forgot who it was about, but this person asked, he said, if I'm in prison and then I am finally released, what's the first mitzvah I should do? Like, what's the most important mitzvah, essentially, right? Which one should I? Which one?
The prayer of the Gomen.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, but the answer was whichever one presents itself to you immediately, right? Which one? Matir Asurim. The idea is that on some level, all the mitzvahs are exactly equal to Hashem. They are all his will. And if you take on his will instead of your own, according to that reasoning, they're all equal. It's all Hashem's will. Hashem wants mitzvahs to be performed. You take on his will. You become that markava. It doesn't matter which one. Do whichever one comes first and go forth, right? Do it with Kabbalah soul. And that's more important than anything else. So I guess our takeaway after understanding all of this is to, first of all, deeply understand that in performing a mitzvah, there's so much more than just doing what Hashem wants and following Torah mitzvahs. It's not an external thing, and it's not just about following rules. It's something so much deeper. It's fulfilling the reason for our existence and letting Hashem know that we want his will more than our own, and we want to continue bringing his name and his will into this world. And we're affirming his Achdus Hashem, that he's doing that, right? He's keeping this world in existence every given moment for this reason. So when we perform Torah mitzvahs, instead of it just being, I don't want to say superficial, but just doing the right thing or it being external, instead to just give ourselves a moment and say, this is amazing, right? This is me becoming a Merkava for a moment. Maybe I'm not Avram Avinu, Levi, Yitzchak, Berditcher for the Malkat of Mizrich, but in a moment, I could do something in the same way like they can. I could make his will greater than my own. And in so doing, I'm affecting the cosmos. I'm literally affecting the world. And yes, it will also refine me. And yes, it lives on forever. But just having that Kabbalah soul is more incredible and more precious to Hashem than anything else. So after we leave this room, the first mitzvah that you do, to do it with that kavana, and it should be for that merit that we should see only shalom in the Middle East and Eretz Yisrael, and the hostages should be returned to us safely.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day.
So the
the limbs of Hashem. To use my eyes and my tongue and my feet and my feet, because he doesn't have them. So he's giving me knowledge, but using my
Exactly. It's amazing. Right?
Thank you.
I love it, Tanya. Thank you. So I love coming here. It's so much fun.
I love hearing.
Oh, forgot to end stream. Thank you.